And we are back on another episode. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Kyle King, CEO of The Writer's Game and founder, seven-time published author. And we're going to be talking about something tonight that is going to build on our perspective and our trainings from last week to be able to ultimately help you magnify your voice and monetize your message. Last week, we talked about part one of how to use your story to be able to write your book. We talked about two major things, and I want you to go back to last week's message to be able to learn those things. But in just a quick recap, we talked about how the first two steps to be able to write your book, how to write your book, the first two steps is to be able to determine your goals, determine your impact related goals, determine your income related goals, as well as number two is reviewing your target audience, reviewing your reader avatar. Okay, so once we understand those, and I want you to go back to last week's training, it's still available on YouTube. If you haven't liked it, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, go back and watch last week because this week we're going to be building upon last week's training. All right, so week two, how to really be able to write your book strategically in 30 days. Let's do it tonight. All right, so tonight, we're going to be talking about how to build your expert framework. How to build your expert framework. And if you want to put it in the comment section, how to build your expert framework, that is the first step. And then we're going to be talking about one more step. Remember, every single week, I'm going to give you two major takeaways as a part of this whole 4-part series of how to write your book in 30 days. But right now, we're going to be talking about how to build your expert framework in this week. All right, go back to last week, understand the first step to be able to set a solid foundation. But right now, we're going over something major. All right, here we go. So everything that we experience, and I'm using my book, using my new book, The Writer's Game, The Business Behind Your Story. So if you see me looking down, if you see me referencing something, I want to be able to follow using the material that we have that is on pre-launch. So if you want a copy, share your email or reach out to our team and we'll be able to get you a copy before the book even goes live, before it goes out to the general public. All right. So everything we experience in our lives, businesses, families, and careers happens for us so that we can be able to impact other people. In my opinion, there's two reasons that we often have the motivation to be able to go off and do something. It's either a painful catalyst or a pleasurable experience. It's either a painful catalyst or a pleasurable experience. It's either something that happens to us that brings us pain, that brings us discomfort, and we want to be the solution to that thing, or something that we experience and it's like, wow, it's mesmerizing, it's magical, it's majestic, and we're like, oh my God, I want to be able to create that type of experience again. All right. So when we think about identifying the painful catalyst, the first step is to do just that. And when we want to be able to develop this framework, a lot of authors miss the mark because they don't have a framework in which how they build out their story, how they build out their characters, how they build out their overall structure of their chapters. But the objective of tonight is you're going to leave with a specific set of steps that will serve as your chapters for you to go off and use this week in between next week's training so that we can be able to start structuring and mapping out the content that will go into these specific chapters. All right. So tonight, let's do it. So the first step is to be able to build upon your expert framework. Now, how we do that, and I have some sticky notes in my book that I'll be referencing, how we do that, when you start to reflect on the moments of frustration, exhaustion, aggravation, or these challenging seasons within your life, it will assist you in designing the introduction of your book in a way that connects directly to your reader's current reality. One of the different pieces of advice that I like to give authors, especially in the introduction period of your book, is that you want to be able to align yourself with the journey or the adventure that is going on in your reader's head. See, a lot of times we're just writing content that maybe sounds good, but when our reader is listening to it, when they're reading it, it doesn't necessarily sound like us. They're not able to connect with it. And it doesn't matter how well written or how well researched your content is. If your reader does not connect, align, see themselves in your content, then they're not going to remain engaged and they're not going to overall get the transformation from your work that they deserve to have. Okay. So these things are super important for you to stay connected, stay engaged, entertain your audience, keep them rolling through the content and retain through the content so that you can eventually get them to the transformation that you promised them when they read the back of your book before they even purchased or began reading your book. All right. So the motivation, I want you to write this down. Get your pens, get your paper, whether it is your computer. The motivation behind why you wrote your book is what? Okay. Some prompts that I have right here, again, on page 17 in the book. The motivation behind why I am writing this book is because you were tired. You were sick of, you were noticing, you were experiencing, you were feeling, you were wanting something, all of these different things. When you think about the motivation behind why you're doing what it is that you're doing, why you're talking about the very thing that you're talking about, why you want to go off and speak on those different things. Oftentimes you experienced this in some part of your life, whether it's you were tired of consistently going through breakup after breakup, and so you want to be able to write a book to be able to help people navigate this dating process and building relationship. You were tired of companies not recognizing your success or recognizing your value, so you wanted to write a manual for people to be able to stand up for themselves or negotiate their salaries and navigate corporate America. You were tired of people wasting money on frivolous things, so you wanted to be able to write a book on financial literacy and how to build wealth but also be able to manage your lifestyle. So I want you to really think about what the emotion that is attached to the purpose in which why you are writing this book. Because a lot of times what we're realizing is we're so focused on the content instead of the actual purpose, in which will create the intent and the context and the detail behind the stories that we're implementing or including in our book throughout the process. Okay, so I want you to be able to identify your painful catalyst by writing down the motivation, or what is inspiring you to do this. What were you tired of? What were you sick of? What were you, feeling? What were you needing that you weren't getting? Okay. And once we understand that first step in identifying the painful catalyst, step 2 would be for us to identify or interrogate our circumstance. So what I wrote down right here, it is believed that the best time to tell a story of something that happened to you is after it happened. The reason is that your emotions are highest, your memory is sharpest, and you're still feeling the effects of what just transpired. The best time for me to be able to write something, and I honestly believe that my best writing comes right after a situation is happening, like when I still feel that feeling. And I honestly believe it's the same for a lot of us, because we're able to write in the present of what we're experiencing, of what we're feeling. And now when the reader is reading that, they're able to walk within our heart, walk within our emotion, and they're able to see that circumstance or that situation or that event that took place so vividly because we're able to write it in detail. When we think about something that happened 5 years ago, let alone 5 weeks ago, let alone probably 5 hours ago, it's not as detailed as we want it to be unless it was something that truly, truly impacted us. There are some moments in my life I can literally recite them as if they just happened. I'm getting chills thinking of some things right now. And those moments are representative or always something that you'll be able to think about. But there's a lot of moments that are very impactful, and that will impact your reader that you may have forgotten about, or you may have forgotten the intricate details throughout that time that may inspire or be a catalyst to a reader taking action. Okay. So I want you to be able to interrogate your circumstance, and how we do that is we literally break it down for you right here. Okay. So the first step is when you were going through that experience, when you were going through that time, what did you feel? Okay. I want you to just write down your feeling. I want you to write down your feeling. When you were going through this, what were you thinking? Like I thought, like what were some things that you were thinking about? What was going through your head? Okay. Then when you were going through this, what were you saying? When you were going through this, what were you doing? When you were going through this, what were you wanting? What were you desiring? When you were going through this, what were you needing? Listen to this. So when you were going through that tough relationship or that divorce, you were feeling inadequate. You were feeling emotionally drained. When you were going through that, you were thinking, that you were thinking that the world is coming down on you. You were thinking about, what next. You were saying that it's gonna be okay, but you really you continue to say that to yourself, but you knew deep down that it really wasn't, and you were feeling this. You were doing what were you doing? You were going to counseling, you were drinking. There were different things that you were doing, both positive and negative. So if you broke it down in that way, now you're gonna turn that content around. You're gonna turn that content around and you're gonna be able to create your framework but before that, I want you to think about it from this perspective. I am writing a book on how you can navigate. In this book, I'm helping you navigate divorce because I was just like you. When I went through my divorce, it felt draining. You're probably feeling inadequate. You're probably thinking that, the world is coming down on you. You're probably saying things that it's okay, but you truly know that it's not okay. And I'm not here to tell you that it's okay because it's not. So now you leverage all of those feelings, all of those thoughts, all of those different times from that experience, and you're going to leverage that as a part of your expert framework. See? So remember, the first step in this process as a part of part 2 is for you to understand the purpose and motivation. So as a part of building this framework, you identify the painful catalyst. What is the inspiration or the motivation behind what it is that you're writing your book about? So you were tired of this. You were sick of that. You were noticing this. You were experiencing this. And then once you understand that, the motivation, the second step is to interrogate the circumstance. Now it's time for you to go a little bit deeper. So when you were going through that specific circumstance, or when you were going through those series of events, what were you feeling? I was feeling this. I was thinking this. I was saying this. I was doing this. I was wanting and desiring this, and I needed this. Now, when you go back and write those specific details as a part of this puzzle that you're writing, as a part of this overall experience that you're creating through text for your reader, now you're able to walk them through their adventure by connecting with them. Now, when they're reading your book, they see themselves in your book. They see the emotion, they feel the emotion, and now you're able to capture what? Their heart. And if you're able to capture their heart, you're able to retain them throughout the whole process of reading your book. So now you can get them to their what? Their transformation. Because at the end of the day, this right here is really a totality of learning experience or a totality of lived experiences that allows you to take people through a transformative process to be able to get them to what? By the end of this book, they're able to write a book, they're able to publish it, they're able to launch it, market, and build a $500,000 company. For you, it may be they're able to navigate the time of divorce. They're able to be more financially literate. They're able to navigate domestic violence. They're able to do X, Y, Z. Now it's time for you to fill in that blank. So once we interrogate the circumstance, now it's time for us to be able to build our expert framework. And guys, if you have questions, if you have different comments that you want to make, I want you to leverage the comment feature. I want you to ask your questions. That's why we're here tonight. Ask your questions, comment them below, and then talk to me. And then I want to be able to answer all of them as we're going through this process. If this is your first time coming, you may have to go back to week 1 where I talked about, or part 1 where I talked about how to write your book in 30 days, part 1, because this is part 2 tonight. But I want you to stay following along because we're going to give you as much as we need to give you before we get to part 3. All right, here we go. So when you think about creating your framework, what I wrote down, and again, we're referencing my newest book, The Writer's Game, The Business Behind Your Story. Now that you understand why you're writing and what your reader is experiencing, you will begin to design the step-by-step framework for your desired transformation in the final step. All right. All through school and science class, we frequently talked about the hypothesis statement before experimenting. Remember that if-then statement? If this specific occurrence happens, then these things will happen. So if your reader goes through what, then this is going to happen. All right, here we go. So the first step is to really reflect on what I wrote down is what you specifically did in your strategy to when you felt these experiences listed above that got you to this point. A lot of times what we'll recognize is that we are or we were our reader at one point in time. Like we're able to now talk about navigating divorce because we either experienced it personally, either directly or indirectly. We're able to talk about bouncing back from bankruptcy because we probably experienced it. So a lot of the different things that I've written about in my multiple books, I've experienced. So I'm able to write about it because that is me closing that chapter to now go off and teach it. But here we go. If your reader, and write this down, I need you guys to stay with me today. Write this down. If my reader implements, insert the steps of the journey that you went through. Insert the steps of the journey. Remember, if you went through that divorce, if you went through that, what are we writing about? What is the motivation behind what you're writing about? If your reader implemented your steps, your process of how you got through it, then they will achieve. What are they going to directly achieve? What's going to happen? What are they going to directly achieve? Okay. Then once they achieve that, well, how are they going to feel? And feel. What are they feeling? When they achieve that thing, that first step, what are they feeling? Then what are they going to be able or be ready for? And be ready to what? What is this going to allow them to be ready to do? So I'm going to use me as an example, okay? So if my ideal client implements the steps of the journey in this book, like let's say I'm doing this from the beginning, then they will be able to write, publish, launch, and market a book and feel confident that they're able to share their story and be ready to speak on stages, build a business, and scale their company and generate more income. The next thing after be ready to is which will help them become a thought leader, an authority, an expert in their specific field, a sought after leader, which will ultimately be and this will help them ultimately be or do a CEO and create freedom. This will be able to create freedom, travel around the world, empower people, generate high revenue. Okay. So what is the ultimate desire? Ultimate desire of people that I work with, they truly want to make a difference. They want to help people. They want to enjoy lives through, having a sense of time freedom. They want to spend more time with their family and their kids and be able to create experiences, but they also want to feel like they're making a difference in the world, as well as building a life that is, obviously income generating. So there has to be a connection between the income and the impact that they create. That is my market, and that may be you as well. And I believe that writing a book, which has helped me create this lifestyle that I live, and has helped so many of my clients do the same thing, I think, and I believe that this is the first step. But when you think of your readers' steps, when you think of their process, what do they ultimately desire in their life? And I want you to write these things down. What does your reader, again, in week 1, we talked about determining the goals and then identifying your reader. When you think about your reader, what do they ultimately desire? What are the steps of the journey that you'll take them through? What will that help them achieve? What will that make them feel? What will this allow them to be ready to do? What will this help them become? And then once they become that, what will this help them be or do? The goal of developing your expert framework is what I wrote down. The goal of developing your expert framework is to map out the full transformation that your target reader will experience while reading your book, as well as additional products, services, or offers that can be created to enhance the overall journey that your reader is going through. Okay, does this make sense? So again, we're going to just recap this first step. In the first step, we're identifying the painful catalyst. We're understanding what is the motivation behind why we are writing this book. I was tired of, I was sick of, I experienced this, I felt this, I wanted these different things. Once we understand that, Now we're going to interrogate our circumstance. Now we're going to interrogate these events. When you were going through X, then you were feeling, then you wanted, then you thought, then you were doing, then you were saying, then you were needing and desiring, and all of these different things. Once we then understand that, now what were the steps across your journey, or in when you were feeling and doing all of those different things? What did you do to be able to overcome those first set of barriers? Then what did that allow you to achieve? How did that feel when you achieved that? What did that allow you to be ready to do? Who did that help you become? And then ultimately, what did that allow you to do? Now, if you're still in this journey, I want to say this. You do not have to be an expert at getting people from point A to point Z. If your journey stops at point M, at point L, at point Q, then you can write a book from point A to point F, okay? And then as you're continuing to work through your journey, and when you get to K, now you can write it from F to K. And then you're continuing to get through your journey, because maybe there's times in life, in specific areas of our lives, where we have not mastered every single step of the process. And that is okay. But what I want you to be able to write about confidently are the different things that you have mastered yourself. And you can sit here and stand confidently on stage or in trainings or just in a conversation and be able to walk people through this journey. All right. If you are feeling this, if you're still with me, put an author. Just put author in the chat. Put author in the comment section. Put author in the comment section if you are still with me. All right. So here we go. So when you think about a few questions to consider, because at the end of every single chapter, I have questions to consider. These are things that you can consider, that you can write down, you can reflect on as you are preparing this specific step. So here's a few questions that I want you to consider as a part of this step. What were the questions that you have been able to answer on your journey? So in your journey of experiencing these things, what were some of the questions that you were able to answer? What were the objections that you were able to overcome? What did this journey help you realize? What did this journey help you become? Or who did this journey help you become? And what was the story surrounding your transformation? When we look at the story, which is obviously the most important part because we're writing our story, what is the story surrounding who you are today? Okay. What is the story surrounding who you are today and what you've been able to experience or what you've been able to accomplish? When you think about that story alone, you can pull out lessons, you can pull out processes, you can pull out a lot of methodologies and strategies and techniques and tactics and all of these different things just from that one story. When you are writing your book, and we're not done, we got one more step. When you're writing your book, I want you to think about all of the different stories, all of the experiences, all of the podcasts that you've listened to, the advice that you've received, the notes that you have taken, the things that you were exposed to, the education that you've gained. And then I want you to include that in your text in a very intentional way, because that's going to add the fuel and the power to what you're communicating through your book. All right. So let's just keep going. Let's keep going. So we got one more step. So the first step is obviously to build that expert framework. So all of that first step was to really be able to conceptualize your book. Now it's time for us to start planning. So a quote of mine that I absolutely love is Dale Carnegie said, "An hour of planning can save you 10 hours of doing." And many authors must correct their writing journey. They write content before adequately unpacking their story, centralizing the key message, and thinking through what experience they want their readers to have while reading their book. The second sentence was Kyle King. The first sentence was Dale Carnegie. All right. So let's get to it. So once we understand how to determine our outcomes and our goals, that's step one. Then we review our target avatar. That is step two. And that was talked about in week one, in part one of the series. Now we have to build that framework, and that's part three, and that's step three. And then once we build the framework, now it's time for us to do what? It's time to plan the content. All right. So what I wrote down here is how will you blank? And in writing your book, your how will I statement is the major problem that you're solving. All right. So I wrote a whole paragraph before there. I didn't know where I wanted to start, but I want you to really think about that. So now that you're clear on who you're serving and how your personal and professional experiences can help to solve their challenges, the theme of this chapter, the theme of this step is to help you design the how so you can actually go about and doing it. All right. So in writing your book, the how will I statement is the major problem. The major problem. Remember what I said earlier. How will I blank? Okay. So I have some examples that I want to share with you. How will I enhance school systems to help them perform higher on standardized tests? How will I help entrepreneurs scale their companies to 8 figures? How will I help women recover after a divorce and create their life after marriage? Okay, so those are some examples. How will I blank? I want you to put your how will I statement in the comment section. Can we put our how will I comment or how will I statement in the comment section? What are you trying to accomplish? What is your book trying to do? Okay, so whatever your central message is, insert that at the end of your initial how will I blank. What is the central message of your book? How will I what? Create inclusive cultures within the workplace? How will I what? Okay. So before you go off and try to create all of the bullet points on how to make these solutions, be patient. It's time to be patient. So then what I want you to do is what we call a coffee chat explanation. And again, this is all sauce from the writer's game, the business behind your story, y'all. This is why this book is so important. This book is literally a manual, a step-by-step guide for you to be able to build upon your story, write it, publish it, market it, and launch it to be able to generate at least $500,000 within 12 months. If you literally just follow it page by page, you can write in the specific pages so that you could be able to build your story in a very cohesive and just intentional way. Okay, so here we go. So now we want to get to your purpose statement. So you understand your how will I statement. Now it's time for us to get to our purpose statement. My book helps. Who is it helping? What is your central message and your central theme and promise? So my book helps women get healed after their divorce. Okay, by insert how you're doing it. How are you doing it? So insert how you do this in one sentence. Okay, I'm gonna give you an example. I got you. I'm gonna give you an example. My book helps high school principals. My book helps high school principals enhance their school's academic performance by assisting them in creating a school culture that is inclusive, collaborative, and innovative. Woo! That's good, y'all. That's good. That's good. All right, here we go. So number 2, my book helps high 6-figure entrepreneurs and business owners scale their organization to 10 to 15 million in annual revenue by using the power of automation, delegation, and systems. Is this making sense? Put a 1 in the comment section if this is making sense for y'all. Put a 1 in the comment section if this is making sense for y'all. This is the third one for the divorce. My book helps middle-aged divorced women rediscover themselves after marriage by assisting them, to have a second chance at life and live life on their own terms. This is it. This is it. So when you think about the how will I statement, like you're going to ask yourself a question. Well, how will I do X? Okay. And now when we're thinking about our purpose statement and what we call our coffee chat explanation, my book helps, insert who it helps. Who is your book helping? Okay. Insert their central theme in your promise. What is your book helping with? And then by how are you doing it? Okay. How are you doing it? So immediately, if this is communicated confidently and passionately, you're able to communicate to other people what your book is about and how you're doing it. I just want to read this again just for you guys, because what we're helping you create is this purpose statement in this step. Because as you're planning your content, this step is super important because a lot of people do not go through this specific series of steps. So my book helps middle-aged divorced women rediscover themselves after marriage by assisting them to have a second chance at life and live on their own terms. My book helps high school principals enhance their school's academic performance by assisting them in creating a school culture that is inclusive, innovative, and collaborative. When you think about a statement like that, now what you're able to do is what? Now you have a framework. That's that top statement. Then the next question that we're going to be talking about next week is, well, how do you do this? How do you do this? How do you actually help somebody do this? Now, this is going to be including stories, including experiences, including framework, and all of the different things. So, just a quick recap. Last week in part 1, we talked about 2 major things. We talked about determining your goals and your income related goals and your impact related goals. Then, once we're able to do that, now it's important for us to understand who our reader is. The 5 components of a reader is their sources of information, their demographic information, their pain points and challenges, their desires and achievements, and their frequently asked questions and their objections. Okay. So once we're able to understand who this book is about and our goals, now this week we're building that expert framework. What does that expert framework look like, Kyle? The expert framework looks like identifying a painful catalyst. What is the motivation behind what you do? You know, you were tired of seeing this, you were noticing, you were wanting, you were feeling, you were expressing. What is the motivation or the inspiration behind why you want to be an author and what you want to write this book about? Once you identify that painful catalyst, now it's time for you to interrogate your circumstance. When you were going through this process, what were you feeling? What were you saying? What were you doing? What were you experiencing? What were you desiring? What were you needing? Now you're able to connect all of those feelings, all of those wants, all of those aspirations to where your specific audience is in their journey. You know, let's use the example of the middle-aged divorced woman. Let's say you are that person, or you've experienced divorce or heartbreak or any of those things. Now, as you're writing the introduction of your book, you're able to go back to that place and connect with your reader on where they are right now. Remember, you probably have passed where your reader is currently experiencing. So if you can go back to the emotion on where you experienced it and what you were going through, that is going to create the detail and the intricate emotion that is going to allow your reader to stay retained and engaged to get them to their transformation. Once we're able to interrogate the circumstance, now it's time for us to do what? To build the framework. What were your steps on how you did it? When you went through those steps, what did you achieve? What were you feeling? What did that allow you to be ready to go off here and do? Then who did that help you become? And then what did that help you ultimately achieve? If we attach our transformation through this transformative process, because again, a book is the totality of lived or learned experiences that is taking a reader through a transformative process, then we're gonna be able to do what? We're going to be able to empower them and then be able to get them to their next journey, their next goal, and where they want to be able to be in the future. Okay. So now, once we start thinking of those different things, we got to planning the content. How we plan the content is through what? A how will I statement. How will I help entrepreneurs scale their companies? How will I help women recover after a divorce and recreate their life after marriage? How will I enhance school systems to help them perform higher on standardized tests or a test? So then what is your how will I statement? After your how will I, then I want you to be able to insert your central theme. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to do in regards to your book? Okay. Then once you have your how will I statement, you flip it into a coffee chat explanation into what we call your purpose power statement. My book helps. Then you know your audience. Who is your book helping? Insert your audience. Then insert the central theme in your promise. What is your promise? And then what is your process? So it's the person, the promise, and the process. Write that down. Person, promise, process. To give you an example, my book helps high school principals enhance their school's academic performance by assisting them in creating a culture that is inclusive, innovative, and collaborative. My book helps middle-aged divorced women rediscover themselves after marriage by assisting them to have a second chance at life and live on their own terms. Okay. So once you're able to write in a specific way like this, it's not about just writing the book. Remember that. This is if you all have not gotten one thing out of me, I did not get on here today, last week, or the weeks prior through all of the content that we've been able to share online and say, hey, just start writing the book. No. We have to be able to do two things before anything is set goals and understand who we're writing to. Okay. Because the goals will allow us to understand what we need to be writing about. Okay. What we need to be writing about. Once we understand that specific step, now we need to understand who are we writing to. Then once we understand that, now based upon who we're writing to, we need to get connected to their emotion. We need to get connected to what they're experiencing. We need to give them something that they want so that they can connect, be retained through the process. And now through that process, now we're able to do what? Effectively plan content. Because the first question after you just read me your purpose statement is what? So after you read me, my book helps middle-aged divorced women rediscover themselves after marriage by assisting them to have a second chance at life and live on their own terms. The second question is what? And you guys should know where we're going with this is, well, how do you do that? And now it's about my book. So if I tell you that this book right here, my new book, can help you write, publish, launch, market, and build a $500,000 company, and you ask me how, well, I've built out specific chapters for you to be able to do that in a specific way. It's a specific process throughout the whole process. Okay. So what are the questions that we have? What questions do we have? And as you're thinking of a question, I'm just going to give you some of the questions to consider at the end of this chapter as you're thinking about planning your content. Okay. What is the root cause of this pain that your ideal reader is currently experiencing? What areas of my ideal reader's life are being affected from experiencing this pain? And how can I relate to these specific experiences as well? And how does my book help to treat or prevent my client's ideal pain? Remember this, and this is what I wrote down here in this section. The size of your paycheck is determined based upon the size of the problems that you are solving. Remember that. The size of your paycheck is determined by the size of the problems that you are willing and able to solve as a part of this whole process. If you are solving minimal problems, your book may be a little bit smaller. If you're able to really dive deeper and think about what you actually did, what you went through, what you experienced to get through and over the different hurdles, the different barriers, and the different times where you felt down, where you felt not good enough, where you felt inadequate, when you were experiencing challenges, when you persevered through those challenges, those were the moments that got you to this point to be worthy of writing this book. There was a story that I heard years ago that I always reference, and it's about the importance that your story is significant. Pastor Stephen Furtick at Elevation Church, he was talking about a time where Bill Clinton was working with an audio engineer, and he was pretty much communicating how the audio engineer and Bill Clinton were going through a book, and they were identifying what parts of the book would be removed because it would have been too long for the audio version. And I hope I get the story right. And they got to the part of the scandal, and President Bill Clinton, looked back at the audio engineer and he said, "Is this significant?" The audio engineer looked back at Bill Clinton and said, "Yes, Mr. President, this is significant." What I want you all to remember is that a lot of times what you believe should be left out, what you believe that no one wants to hear, the moment that you don't feel proud of, the moment that you want to kind of hide, the moment that, defined who you are, the story surrounding your transformation, the story surrounding your motivation, the story surrounding how, disciplined that you are now, how loving that you are now, how graceful that you are now, how kind that you are now. The story surrounding your transformation is significant, and it's time for you to share it with the world. The loss that you had to endure, the challenges that you had to overcome, the things that you had to lose to be able to become the person that is able to give so much today. That person is significant, and the story surrounding this transformation that you had to go through as a part of these lived experiences, it's time for you to write about them. It's time for you to write about them, and it's time for you to take action to be able to write about your story, so that because your story is somebody else's survival guide. Your story that you try to keep locked away is the key that will unlock somebody else's potential. One thing that I say all the time is your obedience is attached to somebody else's destiny. And if you remain planted like a tree and not going place to place and thinking all of these different things, you will be able to bear fruit that other people can receive. Your story is the same way. Your story, your experiences, what you have, that gift that you have been given, it's time for you to write it. And I know it may be painful, but through this process, and again, we're only on week 2 as a part of a 4-part series. A 4-part series, you'll be able to get your story mapped out, you'll be able to get it structured, and you'll be able to launch and share it with the world in a very intentional and purposeful way. I guarantee it. And I'm speaking that. I know there's somebody still on here right now that is on the fence about being an author, that's on the fence about sharing their story, that have been thinking about it for a long period of time. It's time for you to take action. It is time for you to take action, because if your voice stopped working today, what have you built that can speak for you? That thing you give advice from, that thing you love people with, that thing you coach people with, that you tell different people's stories and experiences and all these different things. If your voice stopped working today, what have you built that can be able to speak for you? And I want us to be able to think about that. Guys, this has been a pleasure. It has been such a pleasure tonight. If there are not any questions, I was waiting on a question or two. If there are not any more questions, then check us out. Stay tuned. If you're watching the recording, like and share and subscribe to the channel. Like and share and subscribe to the channel. Put questions in the comment section, and I promise that I will get to them as soon as possible. I love you guys so, so much. Again, this is another episode of the Writer's Game Podcast live show, and we will see you guys next week.